2 years, because it was Martin here said, Graham, you ought to come along and speak on. Speak on your ministry. I thought ministry is sort of like stretching it a bit far. I always used to relate in terms of, what have you been doing for the last 2 years? And I would describe it as inflicting pain and suffering on the good people of Surrey. Be it with a certain bonhomie and being hale and hearty and well met, but it was Bill then suggested we went a somewhat more conservative view in terms of my travels in Surrey with the ONS COVID infection study. So, right, you want to? So in terms of, so you actually know, I actually left the study on the 6th of July, and by the end of June, the number of households that have been called on, it gives you an indication of the size of the scope. But this has been going on, started around about May 2020, when it first started. And if you actually consider, once we got over the initial, we didn't have enough PPE, we didn't have enough tests, as soon as we started having enough tests, the ONS study were already trying to gear up, because they knew the only way we will be able to have a true reflection on how the pandemic was spreading and in what age ranges, they knew they had to do the study. But there's been over 500,000 participants. Some people only did one visit, some people did 4 or 5 visits, some people have done it every month. Nearly 5 million visits. And in terms of the samples, it's not just the PCR tests, and they're all PCR tests, not lateral flow. So all the tests are sent away to a lab. But also, if you're really lucky, that's true pain and suffering, is to have a finger prick. I don't know. We have one of my favourite participants sitting in the room here, who always provided a fine sample every time. Not everybody was always successful, and not everybody signed up to do the bloods. In terms of scope, across the UK and Northern Ireland, the households were randomly selected. So it was, I don't know what mechanism they used, but you sometimes find 2 in the same street, sometimes find, but they were a true cross-section. I visited households, the houseboats in the Thames, the warden of Richmond Park, but lots and lots of, and it's been an education to me. I didn't realise, for instance, the amount of social housing we actually have in Surrey. Quite often it's hidden away, we don't know where they are, but actually and my knowledge and that ability to navigate around Surrey has gone up by 10 orders of magnitude. The process after they were randomly selected, they were sent a letter. There was then affirmed confirmation by phone that they actually wished to participate in the study. And then the first visit would be the special visit where you had to get consent, and there were children from the age of 2 who were participating in the study. From 2 to 10, the parents signed the consent when as soon as they were over the age of 10, is that so that the parents wouldn't hoodwink them into doing it. The kids also signed assent as well, and they consented to 1, 5, and you would typically do the first visit, and then you'd have 4 weekly visits, and then it would be monthly. As at the end of 2020, you could see now the sample size was you had about 164,000 participants. You can see the 6-week figure. And if you actually go now, go to the next chart. Yeah, no. So in terms of the participants is that this is now by the end, by the end of December, you had a number of if you imagine, we did a lot of recruiting at the end of 2020, and 2021 we weren't doing an awful lot more new recruiting, and so but we were still had the number of participants over 115,000, 116,000 being done, tests being done in a fortnightly basis across 62, because some households might just have one. There are some, there were certain addresses that I'd fear when you know that there's certain addresses when they've got a household of 8. Then you actually see the number of participants over a 6-weekly period. You'll actually see that sometimes, because obviously participants are tested every 4 weeks, that's why it's 321,000 tests. And by the way, all these numbers are all visible to all of you on the ONS COVID testing site. There's an awful lot of breakdown in terms of through age range, area of the country, etc. We'll come to a little bit of that towards the end of the presentation. And finally, and yet move on. You'll actually see now we are starting to come down, and the study is now moving to being online. But the study needs to go on. Our soon-to-be ex-Prime Minister coined a wonderful phrase saying that the ONS study is the crow's nest looking out for the impending icebergs. Well, actually, it's not a bad analogy, because every positive test, they do a genome test on. So, and this is the only vehicle now we have of testing across the country where we could be able to see if there is a new variant coming. Because where else are we testing? And you don't want to wait until someone's hospitalized. These are people, so it's picking up asymptomatic testing as well as, sometimes, yes, you know that people are feeling ill and whatever, and we can go through, there is a certain protocol associated with it. Okay. The process, so I got involved because when I spent 30 odd years in IT, I did various different local jobs, and my wife didn't want me at home, and so I thought it'd be a good idea. Oh, I know what I'll do is I'll join one of these market research firms. Quite nice. I can wander around the streets of Ashtead, potter around, and keep myself occupied and get me out of the house. Well, I joined Ipsos Mori in March 2020. Well, no, in January 2020. So 3 months later, I was then out of a job. However, Ipsos Mori were one of the agencies that were engaged as part of the study, because the skills that they wanted to acquire, they wanted people who were customer-facing skills, who could actually organize themselves, who could actually go out and conduct the interviews and do the study. So there was extensive training built, and about 10 or 15% of the people who actually thought they could do it were thrown out, because if you couldn't pass the training tests, that was it. The visits were typically at the start, they were deployed at about 4:30 the day before. You weren't given, all you were doing is, and you will see as a study worker, I'd be given a list of addresses, and I then had to organize myself. There were courier drops set up quite often in supermarket car parks. I mean, the three that I would visit in this area would be, initially it started at Guildford Station. It went for 3 days to the Spectrum, but when they realised that when they set up at the Spectrum, they'd also set it up in the middle of a big gypsy camp, they decided to move it to Sainsbury's at at Burpham. There's also the other one I would occasionally use is Jagged Way, Wandsworth Common Station, and in Felton there was one at Cine World. So in effect, what you had to do is you would collect your samples, and you would have to then take your samples in a particular window of the day, and you had help desks were set up and a whole infrastructure built from nothing. So it's actually quite an achievement. What did I have to do? I had to receive my allocated visits. I had to confirm and arrange appointments. So, you know, occasionally I would be sitting at very strange places, just sitting there, making telephone calls, largely arranging my appointments for the following day. And sometimes the schedulers were kind, sometimes the schedulers were less kind. And, you know, is that I was doing regularly 500 or 600 miles a week, all around residential streets in Surrey, generally navigating via sat-nav, which brings about some other problems which we'll chat about later. I'd have to conduct the visits wearing full PPE, no entry to participants' homes. Yes, there are some challenges. We are all of an age, and sitting in a car for 6 hours it does create some challenges, and we'll come to that later. You would have to use extra precautions if you knew that COVID was present. Invariably, what you would do is I would deliver the tests to the doorstep. Then they would do the test, put the test back on the doorstep, and we'd conduct the interview via phone. Quite straightforward, really. And you asked a questionnaire, and the questionnaire were quite extensive. Generally, a lot of it about employment and how you got there. Then your current state of health. Then a section all about the contacts. And then a section on your vaccination status and had you been traveling, what testing have you had in the last month. And so it was, you know, generally what the questions would take about 10, 15 minutes per person, wouldn't it? Something like that. Yeah, I mean, it is that sometimes they did seem a little strange, but it is that when being able to collect it right the way across the country, it made a very good view. And you had to deliver the completed test within 24 hours. So that you, within your schedule, you also had to plan your visit to the drop to deliver your tests. Okay. Little did you know, but I was the top performer in Ipsos Mori. And recognising, if you actually look at things like the overall average swabs collected per working day, 7.4, I did 10. I worked an awful lot, the number of household visits, and you can actually see is that a good figure was generally 85% plus. My lowest figure was 87%. I just felt that I wanted to, and I would take care to try to visit people when they wanted. And, you know, is that I would recognise you had a large family. Well, large families is the reason why I probably missed some of these breakfasts. Large families, if they want to be seen at the weekend, if they've got young children, they generally want to be seen early in the morning. They want to be seen before 12 o'clock if they've got teenagers. And you started to know, you didn't always have regular participants. Some participants you did see fairly repeat. But I mean, I probably saw you 5, 6 times during the course of the study, something like that. Yeah, and over, you probably had about 20 visits, something like that. But again, you tended to know what times people wanted. You know, people who are busy and active, and you were trying to work. You try my best to work around it. I tried to do it. Some of my colleagues, they wanted to work 9 to 5, and you know it meant that if they had a family, that they had a 4 till 5. If a family couldn't make 4 till 5, then they would only just go and see the parents. But that's why I got good figures. So there we are. Next. Some of the great challenges in my... I learned very early on that I do not want to drink too much. I used to take a lot of fruit in the car, just to keep my mouth. But actually drinking, it was... You know, sometimes it got really uncomfortable. You know, when you're in the middle of lockdown. Plan your route. And plan your route and knowing where your parkland and your public toilets are. I used to maintain that my head office is, I regularly used to do Fetcham, Bookham, East Horsley, West Horsley along that route. And my head office was the little car park in Bookham, because it's got a coffee bar and a toilet. Supermarkets, you think, they're great, but in lockdown it was a nightmare. There you are, you're crossing your legs, you're desperate, you pull up and there's a queue half a mile long, and you can't get in for another half an hour. And plan your call spot. You do need to make sure. The reason why I was able to I got a very high figures is because I was able to contact my appointees, you know, early as I could, by actually making sure that I had a window I could make those calls. Sometimes, you know, I did find some participants remarkably annoying when they don't answer their telephone, which you can't help. But it's very annoying when it's a large family and you want to try to structure your day around the large family and you can't get hold of them. Okay. Good, you know, being a good Samaritan is that I've never been shy in retiring, and I had a few little old ladies, typically living in Epsom and Ashtead, and one said, "Oh, I know you live in Ashtead. Do you think you could, originally what I thought she would ask for, you know, can you get me a pint of milk? No, this is Ashtead." So she wanted milk, croissants, and some smoked salmon. Well, it was quite good because at least it sort of came to a fiver, so it made life an awful lot easier. But I honestly didn't mind doing that. We also had a protocol that if a participant didn't answer the phone, that we had to go and visit and leave a note. And I was called on to do an 88-year-old lady living in Ashtead, living on her own. Went to visit her, and I turn up there and there's milk on the doorstep, paper in the letterbox. Well, you know, you start worrying. I knocked on a neighbour. The neighbour had a key, went into the house, and then he realised, he said, oh, hang on, I think she said she was going to her sister's. So he found actually her address book, and phoned her sisters, and yes, she was there, and she'd forgotten to cancel it. It was very, very sweet, because the next time, she then phoned me and said, "Oh, I've got a little gift for you." But I just did, I think that was just being natural. Lateral flow tests. This is probably still applicable now to many of you if you still have them. Is that many venues, when you went to an event, you would all do a lateral flow test before you went. Why did you do that test? Why did you do that lateral flow test? Who benefited from it? People you're going to meet, right? Did you do one when you came back? The one you do when you come back 2 days after the event is for the benefit of you. Because, yes, you've been good and you've tested yourself for the benefit of everyone else. But can you rely on all the hundreds of thousands of people that you've met at that event or whatever? Did they all do a test? And that's one thing I would always try to, reiterate and try to encourage good practice in the use of the tests. Fighting inequalities is, I visited was asked to visit a family in Sutton. They're the blocks of flats that are very, very close to the Sutton High Street. It was almost certainly a Muslim family. Names like Mohammed tend to give it away. I was a little concerned when I went there because the father met me at the door, somewhat coughing and spluttering. The wife came to the door, was coughing and spluttering, and then a child. And I then said, look, what I'm going to do now is do your tests, put them on the doorstep, and we'll do it remotely. Almost certainly your whole family, I think, probably has COVID. And you could see the tears coming down their face. Both of them had jobs where they were, on 0-hour contract. They clearly, it was not the news they wanted to hear. And they couldn't get lateral flow tests. I'm sure in February and March, we were still finding it quite comfortable. But in some of the big high street areas, the Boots, the big pharmacists had stopped giving out free lateral flow tests. And largely that's where that family probably would be dependent on getting hold of them. And that's why I think that when we stopped giving out the free lateral flow test, because it might have been easier for them if they'd have found out earlier, but because the whole family had become affected. All I could do is I went back down to the car. I did actually make sure that I carried quite a lot of, I established a good relationship with my local pharmacist, but I gave them a couple of weeks worth of lateral flow tests. But is that for some people, I was just saying at the table, it really does, it's very stark when it hits you when you see such, not much poverty, but you could see that the profound effect for them to be actually turned around and saying, well, look, you're going to have COVID, you're not going to be able to work. You can't go out and have the contacts. It was very, very, I mean, I'm not medically trained, but they were people, there was a family showing all the same, all the symptoms, but just didn't have access to the tests. Oops, hang on. I've been talking too much.
No, we come to that point where we need to plug it in.
All right. Okay, right, fine. I mean, I'll tell one other. Everyone thought that during lockdown, the age, the people we needed to worry about, the people we need to look after, were generally the elder population. The saddest case I saw of loneliness was in a 24-year-old woman. 2 young children, twin daughters, 4. No partner, no parents. And, a measure of desperation is that, you know, she wanted to speak to a fat 65-year-old man for an hour because it was someone to speak to. She had some, you know, she was having problems with things like housing benefits. She wanted to have conversation because it was not just not being able to speak to people, but you couldn't get hold of things like, you know, the Citizens Advice Bureau. You couldn't get hold of the council. And she, you know, she was trying to surf and trying to get information off a mobile phone. What I did is I said, look, I sat and listened to her, and I said, look, what we'll do is I'll come back in a couple of days' time. We'll have another test in inverted commas. So I can sit there with a bag, and we can sit outside, and I can try and research some of the things you were looking for. But that's probably the worst case of loneliness I saw. But you talk about, you know, things that I learned. I mean, I said the navigation. I learned that Kingston Council are completely, they have more CCTV cameras than virtually any other council in the country. And if you think about it, is I'm driving on largely with sat-nav. You don't know where you're going, and you would have so, you know, going across yellow boxes, bus lanes. You know, where you're 500 or 600 miles and you're following blindly a sat-nav to where you're going. It's very easy to. We're in business. Right, go to. Oh yeah, the other one I remember is the birthday card. So I turned up and found out that the young 7-year-old in the household, sadly, he had COVID, and they had to cancel his birthday, and he really was heartbroken. Then the following day I dropped off a birthday card and one of these, you know, now you're 7 balloons, whatever. But actually worked in my favour because that family is one of the only family that I'm currently aware of the only gin producer in Ashtead. Ever since that visit, I always seem to do my visit the last visit of the day. And you know, it's and he always has a new flavour for me each time. So it's that the last time was rhubarb and rose. That was very nice. We had a rhubarb the previous time, so it did work in my favour. Right, we can move to the next. Funny times, quirks. You know, I remember visiting a family in Fetcham, and then the following weekend, as I'm doing my weekly, doing some shopping in Marks and Spencer's in Ashtead, thinking, oh, and there is the small girl that I'd done a test on, standing in the middle of the aisle. There's the COVID man! Didn't have problems with social distancing. Why, with numbers of houses, why do they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you know, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 on one street, and the next street there is exactly the opposite way round. Invariably, could now all sat-navs work on postcodes. So the reason why you see lots of people who driving slowly is because they're looking for a house number. Sometimes it's nice if your house numbers are visible, thank you. I like dustbin day. Well, a lot of people put their number on the dustbin. Oh, it's great, it's wonderful. I hate 13A. Well, yeah, you're counting 1, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 15, 17. Then you go into the house and they say, no, I'm number 15. And then you just, you know, you turned up, given them a horrible fright. There you are, turning up in full PPE. And they're thinking, What's this man coming to see me? And I ban named houses. I mean, you know, it's particularly along road. I mean, the worst ones I think are along Effingham Common Road, where they're about 50 yards away from the main road. So how in the hell, you know, if I was a delivery driver, I just wouldn't deliver anything to them. And you know, there's a convention on how streets are numbered. It's just madness. So what I will miss, that participants generally were genuinely pleased to see you. And it was, you know, I will miss that friendly contact, and it was really quite nice, and they were generally, because they realised we were all part of a team delivering it, but there was, you know, is that, and you know, I can remember in January, February 2021, really, really cold. Had a family of 5. I think it was somewhere in Wimbledon Hill, where they had a house where the steps went right the way up, and there was a gale blowing. I was absolutely freezing, and they I had a little wall to sit on, and they brought a heater out onto the porch. You've got to realise I'm going to be standing there for about an hour. If you've got a family of 5, you're going to be there for about an hour and a quarter. And so some of the participants were really, really sweet. You know, is that the great variety of houses, huge, great big double-fronted houses, down to the small. It's the variety across Surrey, and you know, I mean, I didn't realise. I always thought Ham was gloriously posh. There's a huge, great big social housing estate at the back of Ham Common. I didn't know it existed. Unusual locations, I mentioned, you know, visiting someone on a houseboat. The warden of Richmond Park said, well, how do I find you? He said, well, you know what, it's quite easy. He's opposite Pembroke Lodge. But you have to go and see him during the day, because of course, it's a bit difficult. The walk from the gates might have been a bit long. And the mixture of partners, for the participants. What I will not miss, towards the end of the study, the scheduling of the visits was getting more and more difficult, because people had busier times, busier things to do. So it was something that you know, during lockdown, I'd be given six numbers to call. Is I'd phone them up and say, right, you're 9, you're 10, you're 11, you're 12, you're 1, because everyone was at home. It's nice and easy, you know. Occasionally, someone might just have a dental appointment, you know, so that might involve a minor bit of juggling, but otherwise, people weren't going out. Now, obviously, people are all a lot busier. Driving 500 miles a week, I'm happy that I don't have to keep doing that. Bumps and scrapes is that I have to back into about 5 or 6 people's drives every day, and I hate little brick walls that high. And fortunately, I've got an old jalopy, so it didn't make an awful lot of difference. And driving and parking infringements is, I say, Kingston, absolute nightmare. What I learned navigating Surrey, always check your postcode. The data model for postcodes are not, a postcode is not, you can actually have one postcode can go across multiple streets. Well, you learn that if you have to navigate via it. I've learned where to buy petrol. Those are the 3 cheapest petrol stations in this area. I know the location of all the working speed cameras. Because of the amount of time that I was driving, do not illegally park in Kingston. No, it's So, and in Kingston again, be vigilant in the bus lanes, yellow boxes, and remember the location of all public conveniences. Because then you can, we don't have the embarrassing moments. Is that I had a particularly bad day one day where I was given West Byfleet, Feltham, Cobham. I then had to go to the drop. I then had to go to Ashtead, then to the bottom of Tadworth, then at Brixton at 8 o'clock in the evening. And when I got to Brixton, I felt a little uncomfortable. And I saw an alleyway. And but unfortunately, when I came out, there's someone who looked like Anthony Joshua's bigger brother, but bigger and meaner. Look who's following you. Another instance where I found one of my favourite spots was the Hook Road Arena. Very easy to drive in, pop round the corner. And so I did that, but I didn't realise there was a police car behind me. And when I got back into the car, I got my key worker letter out to show that I'm entitled to be out, etc. And he laughed. He said, "Yeah, that's a good spot. We use it too." Also remember trains. I mean, it's another day where it was. This was not far, round about New Year's Day or close to New Year's Day, 2021. Lovely sunny day, and it was a time when everybody's in lockdown, but everyone arranged to meet families. So what they all did is they all arranged to meet on a dog walk. But unfortunately, I was doing sort of like visits in, I think, Esher and around Oxshott and Cobham, and so I thought my target location was going to be the woods either side of the A3. Well, the one on the Esher side, that was car park was full. One on the Oxshott side was full. Oxshott Station was full, but there's an overflow car park at Oxshott Station. So I dashed up to the top. The trouble is, it's got like a pathway along one side, facing the trains the other way. But I thought it was bank holiday, and unfortunately, I was at the point of no return when the train came in. If you did it as long as this became a preoccupation, you could see. Now, coming towards the end. Now, this is where we are now. And this is actually quite poignant. Is that certain things you should have a look at is look at where the age range where you're most likely to catch COVID. Over 50. Why is that? Well, when the Omicron variant started in November, December, I don't think many of us here have got people of school age. And at Christmas, all your grandchildren were locked away and tested to the point of distraction to make sure they didn't come and infect us. And so the big wave of Omicron was largely, for a lot of the school age and the teenage children, was in that window of January to March. We will now become socially active. So we're the age range who's catching it. And if you actually look at it in terms of we're on the border of London and the southeast, is that some of the highest incidence is actually within London, is Kingston. And so even though we would consider ourselves southeast in terms of like Surrey, so a conclusion, we're all over 50, aren't we? We live in the southeast. And there's over 30 of us in this room, so hit the button. It's true. We might be just under 30, so we might be lucky. But it has not gone away. Any questions?
How many parking fines did you get?
Got one parking fine, but what was quite good is I did manage that particularly in Kingston, found what I would do is I would engage with the parking attendant. Because what I would do is I would sit in the car. But you had to, there was no consideration. I mean, the parking attendant could see. You looked in the boot of my car, you could see it was full of PCR tests and whatever. That he realised that I was doing a job and he knew that I wasn't going to be there long. But so they did have some discretion. But once a ticket had been issued, it was lost.
Just a quick one. As regards public toilets,
Yeah.
I used to live walking with the ladies and gents, obviously, and I checked with each council where we were walking. Council are not under a statutory obligation to provide toilets.
I know.
So
I know. I used to plan my route, and I would know where certain places. I mean, I'm a dog walker, so you know where you're. I'd have the Hook Road Arena, the Epsom Ponds. They're generally local ones, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to have to keep on dashing all the way back to Ashtead to come back home to just go to the loo. But when we weren't allowed into people's houses. But I mean, sometimes I would actually, if you saw someone who had a particularly large garden, I said, "Can I go behind the back of your shed?" And they were generally quite. I mean, but they understood the problem. I mean, if you think about it, is that would you like to be in a car for 6 hours? Because that's I would generally you would leave at the beginning of the day, and quite often different days I'd work different hours, and I started to get a pattern of working towards the end. But it would not be unusual for me to leave a house at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning and not come home till 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And you need so you do need to plan where the places you can go are. Sorry? Well, no, I didn't quite get to that level of desperation. No, because no, the ONS study is still continuing, but what it's doing is people are doing the tests are being sent via post, and they will reply by post, and once I think they acknowledge it, and then they'll do a questionnaire online. The study needs to go on because it is the only vehicle we have to see if what variant is prevalent. I mean, there's a new prevalent in India currently that's slightly worrying, where they do not believe that the vaccines are particularly effective against. It's not particularly virulent, but it's is that they need to track what variant is. I'm not a biologist or whatever, but I mean I'm just hale and hearty and well met, and I can do questionnaires over the doorstep. But it is that I could see the value of it going forward. Oh well, I will go back to doing some market research. I did it for about 6 days a week for the last 2 years. So I'm gonna have a bit of a rest. Sadly, my brother passed away not so long ago, and I've got to clear his house and whatever. So I've got bits and pieces I need to do, but I will go back because I enjoy the interaction on the doorstep and the meeting of people, and it is the great variety of humankind that we have, and genuinely is that there are a few odd examples, but there are generally the people are generally pleased to see you, and I find it's quite a rewarding job.
Okay, are there any more questions for Graham? Yes, please.
Given that statistic you just given us of 1 in 30 would have COVID, and in fact I think rates are rising.
Mm-hmm.
You've come today, did you think twice about coming today?
Sorry?
Did you think twice about coming today?
Not really. No, because I mean now the variants are because it's now yes you get COVID, but the fact is the COVID now it is like a mild cold. I mean I've got 2 of my wife's friends have COVID. They're indoors, they're isolating, they're a little they've got a heavy flu. But they're all fully vaccinated, etc. And I would imagine all of us are. But I'm, is that I didn't really want to do it wearing a mask or anything like that. I've worn a mask and full PPE for 2 years. I think I've done, but for instance, there's some fringe benefits that I've had. For instance, I normally suffer from hay fever. I haven't had it this year. Well, because when I'm out and about virtually all the time, I'm wearing a mask.